In part 1, we introduced Arthur Brooks' equation for finding purpose in life. Who created me and for what? And we solved the first part. If you didn't watch that video, in short, we revisited the impressive unlikeliness of our existence. Consciousness is still unexplained. Life emerging from lifeless atoms is still a mysterious process. All of our specific ancestors meeting and mating through centuries to generate us is statistical surrealism. Yet, here we are, existing as the most recent ripples in the unfolding of the cosmos. That's the non-religious origin story. And now we are left with the second part of the equation. For what? So, what were we created for? If we do not believe in a deity, this may seem impossible to answer. We have an awesome origin, yes, but it is hard to attribute an intention to the processes of the universe. Still, we are inevitably connected to everything that came before us. We are not blank slates dropped into existence. The universe has laws. Life functions within limitations. And we would be fools, or depressed, or dead, if we just ignored those constraints. Humans cannot eat plutonium. Humans need company of other humans, and so on. We, like all living beings, have a somewhat vague instructions manual that points towards an ideal life. This helps us understand what we are here for. Therefore, the logical first draft of an answer is, we are here to live in accordance with the laws of the universe. And that includes physics, chemistry, but especially biology, which for our purposes can be understood to include very human studies like neuroscience and psychology. Note that that idea is something that religions and ancient traditions valued. To live in harmony with nature is a tenet in several doctrines, from Stoicism to Tao to the hippie movement. And to all major religions, the ultimate goal of life is to become aligned with a higher order, the source of ultimate goodness and truth, which, of course, is the Creator. And this is a more active way to look at it than just living in harmony with nature. And indeed, the tendency of our non-religious Creator, the universe, seems to be a very strong push towards expansion. But here is the most common trap for the non-religious: to think we're nothing but victims of genes and hormones that control all our behaviors, seeking only to maximize reproduction. However, unrestrained expansion is the same as destruction. It's the exact same mechanism of a cancer. We cannot simply maximize making babies without considering other people and the scarcity in their environment. Complex species need complex strategies to properly expand. And because of that, natural selection favored the expansion of consciousness. In fact, there are other species that display some form of it, like crows, elephants, dolphins, great apes. So the fact that we stop mindless reproduction to think, to plan, and to choose is not a negation of biology. It is the latest, most advanced expression of it. Reproduction may be the strongest drive for human behavior, but we can't forget surviving. For our ultra-social species, a big part of that means fostering harmony with others around us. So we also value becoming more skilled, more valuable, more connected. In this way, evolution favored brains that rewarded selfish action, but also gregariousness and cooperation. So if we aim to become aligned with nature, we must manage those different drives and to be an excellent individual in a cooperative group. That tension between expansion and restraint is in the heart of the human experience. Legendary and controversial biologist E.O. Wilson even proposed that it defined our species. Quote, selfishness beats altruism within groups. Altruistic groups beat selfish groups. Everything else is commentary. End quote. That tension will color everything we do. But this is actually necessary for experiencing meaning. That's the view of the creator of logotherapy, Viktor Frankl. What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for some goal worthy of him. End quote. This idea is mirrored in our very brains in the way dopamine is related to motivation, reward seeking, and learning. So purpose emerges when we become more aligned with the universe that created us. Like a tree growing around rocks, we must express the drive to expand while also showing restraint that the real world demands of us. Reinforcing that, most branches of psychology converge on the idea that healthy human functioning involves growth, autonomy, competence, relatedness, and authenticity. Some may even argue that the ultimate goal of individuals is self-actualization or flourishing or individuation. The names are different, but they all express similar ideas. All of that requires effort and produces tension. The way we can use those ideas in the real world, in day-to-day life, is to see our actions through the lens of sacrifice. That is a loaded word, but we must use it for our non-religious purposes. We actually make sacrifices every day because it is a consequence of the constraints of the universe. If we choose to do one thing, we are also letting go of every other possible thing we could do at that moment. So we have to make sure we are choosing wisely. A proper sacrifice then means letting go of something valuable to obtain something even more valuable later. This is even reflected in our own biology. Growing up, our nervous systems eliminate up to 50% of our neural connections. And this ruthless cutting away isn't meaningless damage. It is how our brains become more efficient, more specialized, more powerful. Again, notice the two parts in the process: what is sacrificed and the expected reward. Many of us, if we sacrifice something at all, do it only halfway. It's become commonplace, especially as technology cheapens dopamine, to sacrifice something worthless and expect disproportionate rewards. And that is the way we all seek instant gratification. Or we do sacrifice something worthy, like time or scarce money, but for questionable rewards. And workaholics and many religious folk fall in this category. Therefore, we need a lens to identify what is a worthy sacrifice. And as humans, we can always return to the idea of self versus group. And more often than not, the worthy choices involve benefiting others. E.O. Wilson tentatively associated acting for the group to the idea of virtue, and focusing too much on the self to sin. Indeed, if we look into people we see as virtuous, they all contribute something valuable to others, to the group. And we call that fairness or compassion or courage or generosity and so on. Even seemingly selfish virtues have others as beneficiaries. Growth, excellence, and competence don't live in a vacuum. The results benefit others. Autonomy and authenticity may seem like selfish virtues, but watch what people with those virtues do. More often than not, they'll use that power to connect to others, to protect the loved ones, to build something valuable for everybody. We can reframe anything we do in the context of the virtue lens. And even though there's no definitive list of universal virtues because they seem to be context dependent, we as individuals, in our own contexts, have a pretty good idea of what they are and which are more important to us as individuals. As Daniel Kahneman puts it, to our brains, what we see is all there is. In other words, whatever we pay attention to becomes disproportionately important in our minds. And like that, we can view even mundane tasks in different lights. Just by doing that, we actually infuse them with meaning. Alia Cram's research even hints that mindset may even influence biology. The most impressive example is her milkshake study. People who drank the same shake ended up with different metabolic reactions. The only difference was the way the experimenter framed the milkshake they drank, as healthy or decadent. This is related to Jonathan Haidt's experience living among religious people in India. He was shocked by their strict customs as they strive to separate sacred from secular at every moment, like taking the shoes off in certain places, using the right clothing, eating the right food. But little by little, those seemingly random customs started to make sense to him. And after some time, they made his world richer, especially in comparison to his regular life when he came back to the US. He described it as adding another dimension to his reality. A meal becomes a ritual of gratitude. A doorway becomes a portal into the sacred. We can choose to interpret a regular chore as a sacrifice of energy to compassion, prosperity, or harmony. Then it will become just. The habit of adding a dimension to reality makes everything more meaningful, and that is a necessary step towards eventually finding purpose. Research also backs the idea of virtue ethics being a valuable step towards a fulfilling life. And we can cultivate virtues that express deeply endorsed values, fulfilling the need for growth, authenticity, and autonomy, in ways that makes us better at real-life challenges, which is related to competence, and that connects us to or benefit others, meaning relatedness and beneficence. From doing chores to being present for our loved ones, to doing a random and invisible act of kindness, to advancing technology or culture, each action will carry as much meaning as the intention behind it. We can do it all for a paycheck or to avoid judgment of others. Or we can find what values are important to us and honor them, even as we keep doing the very same actions we did yesterday. Even as we keep doing the very same actions we did yesterday. As mostly irrational creatures, we cannot argue our way into purpose. We must experiment in the world while also being mindful of how we frame what we see and what we do. So, as a consequence of the unfolding of the universe, here is what we are here for: expansion and restraint, sacrifice in the right altar, action and discernment. Each of us must struggle with those challenges, and the struggle itself is the fuel of purpose. That's how we escape the rigidity of old religious rules. And that's how we avoid the pernicious apathy of having no rules at all. And if you like those ideas, here are some very important books that influenced all those ideas. And they are, in my opinion, essential for living a good life and to understanding what's going on inside and outside ourselves. Build the Life You Want by Arthur C. Brooks, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, The Social Conquest of Earth by E.O. Wilson, and Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. And if you like those ideas, I'm sure you will like very much the next video here in the playlist, and see you in the next one.